Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you and talk to you. And I'm kind of excited to see what comes out of this mini podcast today.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to fellow vegans and to just explore the topic. It can be very exciting and just fun and hopeful.
So let's start by you letting our viewers know where you're situated.
I am situated in Seattle, Washington, pretty much in the city, just north of it, and I ride my bike everywhere for transportation.
Wow, very cool. The next question is, can you share your personal journey towards veganism?
Yeah, probably like a lot of people, totally unaware as a kid. But interestingly, I remember at this point that every time we had meat for dinner, I would watch my mom cooking it and I was like, that looks kind of gross, you know? Anyway, I think that was in my head for a long time. And I naturally, maybe by the time I was like 40, I had really veered vegetarian. Just sort of the same idea is that I just didn't it was the connection of it in my kitchen and having to work with it to cook meat I just didn't like it. So I stopped. And then it was when I was in Seattle within the first couple of years, and I'm a very healthy, physically active person, right? So the diet shifts, I noticed when I went vegetarian how much better I felt. Anyway, I was involved and I am still involved kind of as a rabid ambassador fan of a radio station here called KEXP.
Okay.
And it's pretty well known globally. Anyway, because I live here, was able to volunteer on a marketing committee for a couple of years. And when I did, it was a big meeting, some DJs, a lot of people that work there. One of the DJs is a morning show DJ named John Richards, and he's vegan and he sort of talked about it and made it part of who he is for years. And he would come in, and I love his show. And I knew that he was a really fit person, and I just admired him. And I noticed that he'd come into the meetings with his seeds and, his smoothies and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's right. He's vegan. And then I literally, like, one day I was in this meeting and I went home and I'm riding my bike home and I'm like, why am I not vegan? So to answer your question, from the vegan perspective, it was not a animal. It wasn't an animal awareness necessarily. I came into it vegetarianism through health and then was really kind of triggered by this kind of awareness through this John Richards, and then really realized the climate aspects. And so I've been in climate for a long time. And I was like, this is so exciting. I must work in food in the climate space. And it was through that process that I made the real connection with animals, met a lot of people in Seattle who were connected with the animal sanctuary here, et cetera. So I think people have their journeys. And I came in through the health climate, then like really now understanding the animal connection. And so that was my thing. And I will say that a lot of people around me, because I do influence a lot of people around me to consider it. And a lot of people around me are like, oh, but I could never give up dairy. and I'm just like, that's what I thought. And I just decided, and within 2 weeks, I could feel that my workouts were different, everything just sort of changing the way I ate like that made such a difference. So I am kind of a walking, talking kind of ambassador for it, not with bashing people over the head with it, but just like, you look great, you seem happy, So I feel like that's sort of how I came to it. So I just was, inspired by somebody, influenced by somebody who I admired. And then I took the chance, and I think the benefits of it come through in the way you feel very quickly. And then I was like, why haven't I been doing this for years? And so wanting to be a model of that behavior and in case I could inspire other people.
That is awesome. And, the animals don't care how you come to veganism.
Exactly.
Health, climate, animals, they just want you to go vegan and they don't care how you get there.
I
Uh,
know.
and then sometimes people come into it by health, and as they learn more, or by climate, and as they learn more, then they start to see more the connection, and then they totally go into that whole veganism aspect of encompassing all of those things.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I just wanted to touch on two things that you said. So you talked about, you thought it was gross when they were cooking the food. I totally, when I had to cook, and I'd be slicing or whatever, and I'd be, this was my face, gross, 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 throughout the whole process. Like somehow deep inside of me,
You
I
knew.
knew that this was not normal, no matter how many people want to say it is.
Well, and that's the thing that it's fascinating to think back on being a little kid and having that kind of in my stomach, and then kind of, being a full-on adult and just never really loving meat and not knowing why. And then that awareness. And so I love the stories now of younger people who've come to it through animals. And I have dogs, I'm just like, how could anybody, as soon as you make the connection, it's really interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with even an awareness of your body, like an awareness of how you feel. How do you feel when you eat dairy and meat? And as soon as you make that connection, you're like, not so good. But it's how long it takes for each of us to figure that out is really interesting.
Exactly. The other thing I wanted to touch on that you talked about is like how people say, I can never go vegan because I can never give up dairy. Now, I used to be total milk lover, even though every time I had it, my stomach would be upset and it was terrible because, all the advertisements said milk is good for you. And I would have it all the time. And I'm like, oh, I could never give up milk. Well, let me tell you, I'm so glad I gave up milk because that feeling I had in my stomach, again, is like when I was cooking, somehow deep inside, I knew that was wrong. And having the milk or the cheese and whatever would upset my stomach terribly because I'm not a baby cow.
I know that's the thing. And I had the same thing for years with eggs. I would go out with my friends to brunch and I would get eggs and whatever. And it was so fun. And then like 2 hours later, I would feel horrible. And so then even before I went vegan, I slowly started to just eat like vegan, tofu scramble and stuff. Cause I was just like, for some reason, eggs don't agree with me. So it's like dairy doesn't agree with you. Eggs don't agree with you and meat doesn't agree with you. If you really sat and thought and were aware of your body's telling you something.
Exactly. So, how do you see veganism contributing to the fight against climate change?
Well, that's the thing. The I'm climate influence is my thing. And I advise and coach and kind of speak and have podcasts on it. Like this is what I do. And the food systems, IPCC is the big international body kind of that does all the research on this topic. And I think it was 2018, they came out with a special report and they said that 4 top things that we could really address for emissions reduction very quickly. And just one of them was agriculture. And you look at that and it's land use, it's biodiversity. But even if you just look at land use, the amount of land that we use to grow crops that feed cattle versus, right, crops that would just feed us directly is outrageous. And that's a story, again, that hasn't gotten out. So I was really intrigued by the land use story from my perspective of wanting to tell stories about this and really to get in the heads of leaders. So my audiences it's the B2B space. So I'm trying to find people who are vegan in the leadership space who are willing to talk about, the climate connection, the climate connection between food, and emissions is outrageous. And it's this easy for, to start to go vegan and have all these benefits of it. So I really dialed into the land use and the emissions reduction. And that has become a really powerful part of my story. I really focus on food systems, transportation, and cities broadly. But I find the most joy in this because you say you bring a friend or bring somebody to a vegan restaurant for the first time. The point is not, it's horrible. The point is try it, you'll like it, and everyone likes it. And then it opens this conversation. So the climate connection and the emissions reduction that we could get to very quickly if we could really transform into this food system would be amazing. And so I see that as a huge opportunity, and influencing that shift at the kind of leadership or influential people out in the news saying that they've gone vegan is kind of a part of what I want to do, because we need to change the social norm. And I think that's a big lever.
Yes, for sure. As an influencer, like what strategies have you found most effective in encouraging others to consider veganism for the environmental reasons?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the one that things like this are happening, right? Stories get out, more people are doing media that gets out and about, and to normalize it. So to see someone you admire, right? So the way that I went vegan was I realized that somebody I admired was that it made it seem accessible. It made it seem like something I could do. I was a little bit more motivated. So that's my thing is you change the social norm by representing that a couple of people that you maybe aspire to be like or admire are, and then that starts you thinking. And the other aspect of that is just kind of on a neighborhoody or a community or a local level. All of my neighbors know because I go to like potlucks in the summer and I bring the vegan dish and it opens these conversations. And I've moved a lot of my neighbors to trying more plant-based meals. And that's just by being me and being joyful and saying I love it and offering resources quickly if they say, but I don't know how to whatever, right? I just send them a link to it. So it's your own modeling your behavior in all of your spaces. And especially, I would say professionally, like we need more kind of people in the professional world to get this. Then doing what you can to influence what's the meals that are being served at events, big conferences, kind of being louder about demanding that you need a vegan meal at these places. And I'm doing the same thing now with restaurants. Restaurants, I'm meeting friends there and I have to call in advance and say, what do you have that's vegan? And it's this whole, so being a little bit louder, not in an annoying way, but being a little bit more visible and louder that you are somebody that is vegan and all of your friends like you for a lot of reasons. And then they realize, oh, so modeling the behavior and being a sort of a joyful ambassador for it, I think is really powerful.
Right. And when you said like reaching out to corporations, so if they're having an event, like for example, if an animal organization is having an event and they invite me, like if I get an email, I'll write to them and I say, are you serving anything, are you serving vegan food? Or people who ask for donations, the heart, the diabetes, whatever associations, and go, oh, we're having this event, could you donate? And I'm like, are you promoting vegan food? And, sometimes they answer back, sometimes they don't. And most often is no. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I can't support your event if you're not acknowledging that, switching to a whole food plant-based diet, veganism has something to do with it because
Yeah.
you're not walking your talk.
Yeah. And that's the thing is there's so many ways that organizations, kind of all these events aren't walking their talk. And again, there's a way to encourage that from some of these organizations by saying, you know what? X organization over there that I give a lot of money to knows to have vegan options at their whatever, right? Like you name and fame the people or the organizations that are already doing it. It may be a few, it may just be a few, but my whole point, and this is the work I do with leaders and on my podcast, is to elevate and name and fame those few people or organizations that are addressing this head on, make them famous, interview them more, get them in the news more for their climate, for all the reasons. Organizations, PR people will start to get a hint. And that's kind of the method for this. So yeah, you have to reach out and you can say, hey, but by the way, this organization's doing it. And, there are organizations that can help you move your event catering in that direction. And so all these things that really help, I think.
I truly believe that. And like you said, get vocal and not in a nasty way, like you said, but like speak up. Don't just accept, oh, we don't have any vegan options. You have to say, you have to tell them. Otherwise, they just continue on same old, same old. So if you don't speak up, you're not doing anyone any favors about, because you want to be polite, you don't want to cause a scene, but you don't cause a scene by asking, do you have any vegan options available for this event?
Well, and the other thing that I found is that I will kind of do some research and I will email them in advance. Like I said, just even a restaurant, a group of us who want to come to this restaurant, I'm vegan. And if you don't have a vegan option, we're going to go someplace else. So I don't see any vegan options on the menu, right? Like maybe you should put some on there. I get a lot of restaurants that'll be like, oh, we'll whip something up for you when you get here. And I'm just like, no, you need to start putting the stuff on the menu. So it's really interesting because, as you say, more of us need to be more vocal about it because it will shift. There's just no way. There are more and more of us, and more friend groups have at least one vegan in them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's keeping us from being able to go to lots of restaurants.
Right. So, like yourself, who work with corporations and policymakers to promote veganism and sustainable practices, this is the way we get them to do it in a larger scale.
Yeah, yeah. And I did do some work this last year with the Plant-Powered Carbon Challenge in New York City, which is a really good example if anybody's interested in looking at a city that's approaching this in a really smart way. What they're doing is incredible. And so it's programs like that, that really, and Greener by Default, it works with corporations and universities and stuff. They're the big ways to make these shifts, and the behavior change aspects have been studied. And there are organizations that can really help you very quickly figure this out.
Yeah. So, so when we are approaching someone, and I think that all approaches are okay because we are such a diversified group, worldwide population. We don't all like the same things, and we don't all answer to the same things. So, for example, you have a Gary Yourofsky who's like right to the point and tells you how it is, and he doesn't make any apologies for his message. And then you have someone more like perhaps Will Tuttle, who is more soft and stuff. So I think all aspects are viable ways to promote veganism.
Well, that's the storytelling thing, right? We have to be connecting with somebody who has a story that's similar to ours. And so that's the thing. So everyone should be talking about this and modeling this behavior because we're going to reach a very unique set of people that might not be reached by another kind of approach. I've heard that from a lot of people saying that they really appreciate that I'm not, really kind of making a big deal of it, but I'm just kind of subtly making suggestions and they've just like, yeah, this is the first time that I've even tried some stuff because you made it seem so accessible. So.
Right. So tell our viewers if they wanted to get in touch with you and the services that you provide, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely on LinkedIn, Andrea Learned. If you do Andrea Learned, it should come up. But Andrea Learned Climate online will bring you me all over the place. And I, for a long time, was on Twitter, and that was amazing. But obviously, Twitter is a no-go now. And I am on Blue Sky, and finding that a really nice, not nice, but a really powerful place to be because there are a lot of climate media. And so I'm on Blue Sky heavily. And because I'm in B2B, it's the LinkedIn and Blue Sky mainly. And then my name, AndreaLearned.com. That's my website. You can find more stuff there. I also have a Substack that should be easy to find with my name. But my site would be AndreaLearned.com. And thank you for letting me share that.
Oh, my pleasure. I want to thank you for being on the Vegan Podcast. Any other words you want to, throw out there to our viewers for consideration?
I feel like be ready with some really easy link to send your friends if they seem at all interested. Like I have one that's like a really accessible, easy cookbook or something. And I just have that really ready to send to people. I find that people really appreciate that. And then, I think just figure out a way to get a little bit more comfortable telling your story, finding safe spaces to tell your story, because you never know who you can, whose mind you can change. And I found that even in business situations. So I guess my plug would be figure out a way to bring this up in more business or professional situations, because that's where we can really make big change.
And especially in this time and age that we are experiencing, it really is very important that we speak out and not get silent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what we're doing is we're speaking out about the joy and the health, and there are all these ways to present this that will appeal to a lot of people that don't have to become really bipartisan or political at all. And I think that's a huge opportunity now that we can get better at learning how to do that. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing that we are.
Thank you, Andrea, for being on the Vegan Pulse.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Nancy.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.